Thank you so much. It was wonderful to learn a little bit more from both of you, Manas and Dr. Selvamurthy. So I apologize if my pronunciation is not perfect. But it was really interesting to listen and hear from both of you, and especially as you have so much experience in this particular area in psychology, particularly positive psychology, is also my background. So I have a degree in psychology, and then I have worked for a long time in the education sector, specifically looking at well-being in education, so from more of a systems and organizational lens. And I'm currently doing my master's at the moment at Melbourne Uni through the Centre of Wellbeing Science in applied positive psychology, so deepening that. And I do see a huge amount of value with positive psychology for the young people. I think for today's youth, and I heard you both speak about some of the problems or some of the challenges facing youth in India. It's always interesting that even though India can seem like a far away from somewhere like Australia, and of course, there are lots of cultural differences and how we conceptualize well-being. There are probably differences within that as well. But I think some of the shared challenges for young people are what you have spoken to with, fears of climate change. It is a more volatile and uncertain world. The pathways to success are much more disrupted for Gen Z, and I guess will be as well for Gen Alpha, Gen Z being from 12 to 27. So I imagine a lot of people fall within that bracket. And I think that means that Gen Z come with a very different perspective on the world, that we who are working in education and with organizations and with young people need to remember and keep in mind. And I think we hear a lot in Australia that Gen Z seem to be, not that interested or not as interested in work and these types of things. But actually what we know from the research is that they are actually more, particularly in Australia, where some of the research that we've done is they're actually more ambitious than previous generations, but the pathways to getting there they see as different, because that sort of set and forget model that they might have had from their parents, where it would be, okay, you go to school, you get a good mark, you go to university, you get married, and you can kind of move your way along the path, buy a house, these kind of things. Particularly in Australia, that's become heavily disrupted. Young people are living still with their parents, are learning that they may never be able to afford a house, and that there are lots of other ways to get ahead in life, and they're very creative and resourceful, and because of technology are turning a lot of their kind of passions or side hustles into careers. But they're also finding really innovative, novel ways to address challenges. And I think this is where positive psychology can really be useful. I think hope theory is a really interesting piece of research that's coming out right now, which is this idea that hope gives us tangible pathways or tangible things to think about solving problems. And I think that's particularly important for climate change, which is actually thinking up solutions and participating in solutions can actually improve your well-being. So when we start to feel quite disillusioned by things like climate change, actually participating and having tangible pathways to think of solutions, even if they are really small in your sort of grassroots area, can actually really help improve your well-being. I think something else that we're learning here in Australia, and I'm sure it's relevant across globally, is burnout. It's very interesting to see how that is a real mixture in organizations between employees, but also the organization. So if I'm talking directly to young people rather than to organizations, I think there's a lot of lot to be said for setting healthy boundaries between your work. I think particularly if I was speaking to young women, there's a lot of new research coming out about self-compassion. If you would like to be directed to learn more about that, there is a lot of really interesting work being done by Dr. Michelle Quaid, who has started a Substack and a whole model called The Good Girl. And I think there's a lot of research coming out about that. I recently saw that she's done a podcast with Dr. Kristen Neff. If anyone is familiar in the positive psychology space, Dr. Neff does a lot about self-compassion. So self-compassion versus self-esteem. They now see that self-compassion is a much more stable predictor of your happiness and your well-being than self-esteem is. And there's lots you can do to cultivate self-compassion. And I think particularly for young women, this is something that would be very relevant to think about, because as women, we do have some additional societal pressures in terms of the way we behave and the way we show up at work in particular, that can break down some of those boundaries. That can mean that we break down some of those boundaries and tend to be more susceptible to burnout, and also balancing that with the workload that we have at home as well is important, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing your views, Mom. And I remember reading about hope theory myself, and it's interesting to know about it. And as you talked about self-compassion in Women for STEM, we really talk a lot about that when we have our group meetings because it's important, as you said. And it's one of the major things that I think might push women to take up STEM, like loving themselves and believing themselves. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
I think I liked also, Johanna, about the hope. The whole life depends on faith and hope. So I'm glad that you brought out in that positive psychology the role of hope. If you are hopeful of looking at the future with positive attitude, then your life is pleasant always, both at present as well as future life. So thank you so very much. Now we have also another IT expert. He is Mr. Sathish, and I love him in terms of his attitude and the sense of humor with which he communicates, and he has a lot of message to tell the youth. Over to you, Sathish, and introduce yourself briefly, and then give your message to the youth.
Oh, thank you, sir. Namaste and welcome all. And my name is Sathish Vyas. People call me Sats as well. And I've been a professional in the marketing, especially from advertising agency. And I did a switch to IT company, doing multiple roles, product management, product marketing, and I've embraced design. So I'm a design thinking coach. I practice and preach human-centered design, which is very much grounded in human behavior and human empathy. I would love to help teams to embrace design. Eventually, how can they improve their experiences in our daily lives? So that has been my passion and goal. For today's session, I would like to talk about taking our first steps, because any journey that we start, it has to start with step. There's a famous quote from a Chinese philosopher as well, right? A journey of 1,000 miles begin with a single step. And in today's context, it connects to all the points that Manas sir or ma'am or Selvamurthy sir spoke. And today's youth has too many options. It's a complex world. And they have many resources in terms of videos, Google search. Wherever you land up, whichever direction you turn, there's so much of information overload for them, and that creates apprehension as well. But take use of this as advantage, and then people get drowned. So it's a complex world, right? But if we were to step back, we all have done this, right? When we were kids or infants, we never bothered about anything. We always try out new things, taking our first step, exploring new places, or trying out new dish, or picking up objects, all those things. But somehow, somewhere down the line, when we grow up, we get comfortable, and then every step becomes a challenge, right? Sometimes, if especially the scenario is unknown, we hesitate to take the first step. But at some point, we have to do it. Sometimes the nature forces you to take the steps. Sometimes you have enough information, knowledge to get to know things. For example, we all do this, right? So if you waiting for a bus, the bus is late, you're late to your destination, we try to look for alternatives. We look for an auto or book an Uber, or even if on the journey, if the road is blocked ahead, we find alternate routes, right? So I think we have the inherent ability to do that. But the more we think about consciously, and then the other factors come into place, and then it becomes a bit of a challenge, especially for today's youth. I think one way to overcome is to being curious. If you're curious, I'm sure it'll help you to overcome some of the fears, right? So we all have these fears in terms of fear of unknown, fear of failure, fear of being judged constantly, especially in the social media world. I think if you're curious, you will go the distance to get to know the answers, explore the places, try out new things. So being curious is very important. And I have embraced myself, having done multiple roles. Every time when I take up a role, I would look for something that I've not done before. So it is an unexplored place, but it also you take advantage of your peers, your colleagues, available information, and do your learning homeworks, talk to them, connect with them, and then eventually you take your first step in terms of exploring and doing it. So I want to leave you with a couple of things. One is staying curious, be curious, and embrace the unknown. Even though you heard this many times, taking the first step to accomplish that, it makes the whole lot of distance, and you never know where the journey could lead. And most importantly, may or may not be an exciting one, but certainly you'll have a lot of learnings end of the journey. And I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Rumi. Says, as you start to walk on the way appears. And the other one, which I added, is from another popular brand. So let's keep walking. So I want to share.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Sathish. I think this is the right message. Keep going, keep moving.
Yep.
Keep doing karma. That's what Bhagavad Gita also says. Keep performing your actions with perfection. And everything is a consequence. It has to follow today, tomorrow, day after. But keep doing good karma and without expectations. We always hanker again for the fruits. What are we going to get if I do this? So don't look for those and keep moving ahead. And with regard to happiness, I would also like to say, happiness need not come from anywhere, because you are embodiment of happiness. If you realize, if you are Atma, Atma is supposed to, the true nature of Atma is pure, blissful, happy, and powerful. And Atma is Bharpur. Bharpur means you are everything full. You are full. You don't need anything. You don't need any appreciation from outside. You don't need any wealth from outside. Everything, you don't need any empowerment from outside. You are power. You are everything. So if you realize this true existence, then you are happy yourself. You are the embodiment of happiness expressed there. Now let us also discuss a little bit about present day children, particularly when they are looking for the life partners and they settle down in life. A lot of conflicts, arise, and also the separation happens sometimes. So how do we resolve this issue of bringing a harmony in their life at the early part of their youth, when they get married, when they get settled? We find a lot of diverse and conflicts across. How do we make this happy life? And I would like to churn out the thoughts from Mandal. Uh, how do we accept people? Because we always expect from people. Instead, if you accept people as they are, will it help? Over to you, Manas. Let us a few more minutes discuss about this. How do we create a happy married, better life? And or even if they are single, how do we make them happy?
I think the happiness, I mean, I worked with Martin Seligman, actually, who is the father of positive psychology. And I read the book, what Johanna said, The Hope Quotient. His last book is an Hope Quotient, and we discussed a lot about it. As he said, that to get a happy and blissful life, people have to understand that there are three facets of happiness. One is called affluence, one is called autonomy, and one is called appreciation. When we talk about affluence, it's about all what kind of resources you have: financial, economic, physical, psychological. People are not happy with the resources. If you are only happy with the resources, then a time will come when we will realize that despite having the resources, you do not have the autonomy to make use of it. So people may have less, but if they have got full autonomy to make use of their resources, they are probably happier. And then I have seen a set of people who do not have the affluence, neither have the autonomy, but they still appreciate the life they do have. So the kind of appreciation that we need through hope, actually, hope is a quotient actually in our life. If we have appreciation as part of our wisdom, that well, we need to appreciate people as they are. Nobody is bad. It's the relationship that becomes bad. So when people find it challenging, they do not understand what is the real conflict in the relationship. Is it compatibility? Is it complementarity? Or is it something related to, the compatibility and complementarity is a big issue. People start thinking that they must be compatible to each other. It is the complementarity which actually binds them. Your strength must be my weakness and my strength must be your weakness. So that kind of complementarity, if we can achieve, probably a life would be very happy.
I think wonderful, wonderful. Well said. Instead of look for complementarity rather than, and then you also start comparing. That comparing creates a problem. So let us not do that. And very good. Now, can we have the thoughts of Dr. Johanna? Can you share some thoughts on this issue? Because how do you look at this, the present challenges with youngsters getting united, getting separated? So how do we build this bond? Can you just, as a psychologist, and can you throw some light on this positive psychology? How does it help these children? Over to you. Dr. Johanna, are you there?
Yeah, actually, now she's there.
I'm here. I got it. We're still grappling with the technology of Zoom 5 years later or whatever it is. I would say the first thing is that our relationships, I think we now know the science shows us that our relationships are the number one predictor, or the most robust predictor of our long-term health and happiness. They not only help us feel better, but we now know from loads of biological studies that they have all these downstream effects on our hormones, on our inflammation, even on epigenetics. So our relationships are important, not just the amount of relationships we have, but the quality of our relationships. The science tells us that those who are in happy relationships fare the best. In fact, the quality of someone's relationships at, I think it was at 40, was the biggest predictor of their long-term longevity, more so than whether they smoked, were obese. But that being said, women who are single fare better than women who are in unhappy marriages. So that's also something interesting as well. I think the other really important thing that I have seen is that in the research is that it is not just the quality of your relationship, it's actually the happiness of your partner. Your partner's happiness is predictive of your long-term happiness. So that is to say, if you marry someone who is quite an unhappy person, you might think that that might also impact your happiness. But it also shows us that your partner's happiness is important. It's not just important to you because you care about them, but it actually impacts your happiness. And I think that brings me to my next point, which is that relationships are a partnership. You have to sometimes put the relationship above your own individuals, such that if you both want to get your own way each time, neither of you will be happy. So sometimes it is about compromise, and I think it is about communication, clear communication about your needs. And from a personal perspective, I do find that to be very helpful. I have a partner who is I have learned a lot from, in terms of he is very clear on his needs and his boundaries, but he is also very accepting and tries his hardest to meet my needs and my boundaries. And I think sometimes we can find it very difficult to voice our needs, but actually it's very attractive. When you do this, people find it actually much easier and much respect you a lot more when you're able to be clear about that. And I think that's important too. But I think at the end of the day, fostering our relationships is very important. Lastly, I would say that even if you are not in a close romantic relationship, the science shows us that it doesn't need to be romance, that we can have close interpersonal relationships with friends. Intergenerational friendships are very important as well, so with your family members. But also there's some new emerging research about the importance of micro connections, so weak ties with strangers. So and I think we all learned that from COVID, even though you might have been able to see and speak and keep those close, intimate relationships with your family and your partner or your friends, it was the broader everyday interactions that we had with our, coffee barista or your fellow university students, or the people that you caught the public transport with, that diminished, and they are as important. So we also need to focus on that just as much. So if you're feeling like maybe your interpersonal relationships are not going so well, you can be reminded and feel positive and buffered that the small positive interactions that you have just in your daily life, and even just smiling and thanking people, can not just boost your happiness, but also others' happiness too. And I think that's a powerful and important thing to remember.
That's great.
Great.
I love it.
Good.
And also thank you for sharing your own experience and how to radiate happiness around, keep a smile on your face. Relationships are very, very important in life. Mr. Sathish, can you have some thoughts on this and the final message, so that we will have just 1 minute each final message and we'll conclude?
Sure, sir.
Sathish,
it's a great question. And then to me, it's 3 aspects. One is communication, and the other 2 is tolerance and patience. I think oftentimes the best communication is when no words are exchanged, especially in relationship. They are so in sync. But we also need to be patient for the other person to go through the learning, go through the journey in terms of making mistakes, acknowledging it and realizing it. At the end of the day, nobody is perfect. It just everyone needs their time to go through the journey in terms of realizing, and that requires one has to be patient to accommodate that, right? The conflict arises when we are in a hurry, or we don't give an ear to the other person, and all those other aspects. So to me, the key aspects are communication, and then tolerance, and be patient for them to realize and then come back, and then it really blossoms into something magical.
I think you emphasized very important issue of communication. Communication is just not only in terms of words, what you speak, what you think about, the thought process, the thought energy which you send to the other person. with whom you are transacting a business or interaction, relationship is very, very important. Your thoughts are more powerful than even your words.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Now, finally, to conclude, each one of you, just in 1 minute, the message you want to give it to the give to youngsters, so that this will be the last word from each one of you. Over to you, Dr. Manas. 1 minute.
Yeah, I think by communication, I would emphasize more on our non-verbal communication, because God has given us speech only to hide our thoughts. So at times, more often, we actually camouflage our words. So it's better, we must learn how to contact eyes, how to express ourselves, how to look at others, how to I mean touch is a great important thing. How to maintain silence. Silence is also a speech. We've never realize it, how to effectively use it in our relationship. We never say our mother, I love you. We don't need to. We don't need to. We just sit beside her, and that's enough for me. So I think communication must also be emphasized along with the verbal communication, our way of looking at things rather than what we say. So how we say is important rather than only what we say.
Thank you. Thank you. And then also, from what level? Is it at thought level, or it's only at the lip level? Is it's coming out from the heart?
Yes.
Now over to you, Dr. Johanna. Just last 1 minute for you. Message, the one minute message for the youngsters.
Yeah, I'm reminded with this conversation about communication and how we do it of Barbara Fredrickson's research on positive emotions. And I was very lucky enough to hear her speak at a conference 2 years ago on positive resonance, which is when we connecting, and then we are actually like syncing up in our positive emotions, and they can even see it in our brain chemistry and whatnot. And she was saying that number one to do that is in person. In that in-person communication is so important. And number two was actually on the phone. And then number three was on Zoom. So that we are actually more connected, more likely to have positive resonance on the phone. So if you are traveling, and this is very relevant for this digital generation, the younger generation, in person is you're going to get the most out of your relationships and connection, followed by picking up the phone. Which they don't like to do so much, and then Zoom or text and whatnot. So yeah, if you really want to create that bond, which we get from positive emotions, and we get so many other amazing benefits from positive emotions. If you're interested, look up Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory. But yeah, in person, I think is very important to remember, especially for the digital generation.
Thank you, Dr. Johanna. And Sathish.
Yes, sir. My two things for today's youth is be bold and have fun. I think we are taking life too serious, as it is too short. I think we forget to have the real fun. And that is life living to me. And for that, you have to be bold, break all the barriers, and challenge yourself and live your life. That's what I want to leave it.
Thank you. With this, I would like to conclude by thanking all these three wonderful speakers who have spoken from their hearts, and they have, with their own life experience, they have shared. Please make use of it. But the final message from me is life is beautiful. Color, music, light, love, everything is fantastic. So look at those, enjoy every moment of your life, which is very precious. And the final message is don't keep expecting, accept people as they are, accept things as it happens, swim with the stream, and have a positive attitude. That's the way to keep the life happy. Keep smiling and have a wonderful decades and generations ahead. Happy life. I wish everybody a happy life and best wishes. And thank you, Ruchita, for this opportunity. And I sign off. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Over to
Thank
Ruchita.
you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Ruchita. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you so much.